Hey everyone, Georgie here with Ukraine Matters. Welcome to the second video where we're going to talk about the new military command of Ukraine, who they are and what they're doing. In first part, we covered General Syrsky, the new commander-in-chief of Ukraine. However, the changes were a lot larger than just changing General Zaluzhny to General Syrsky. It included changes of other team members on all levels. And today we're going to introduce ourselves to the heads of the new team. You don't have to have watched the previous video, but if you do, that would be very appreciated. With that said, let's start it over. So this is an article by Ukrainska Pravda where they describe the specific people that have came in different positions, their experience and their history. And this is obviously auto-translated again, so if there's inconsistencies in English language, please excuse me. I'm just going to be reading it how it's written. From the head of the internal troops at the time of the Maidan to the legend of the war, who joined the general staff and Syrsky's team. On February 10, a message about meeting of the head of state with the military leadership appeared on the president's website. In the published photos, Volodymyr Zelensky stood surrounded by generals and brigade commanders, most of whom have already managed to christen the command of the new commander-in-chief Alexander Syrsky. Some of the generals in the photo have indeed already been appointed to the positions of the general staff of the armed forces. Some of them, as sources of the Ukrainska Pravda, this is the UP is the name of this media source, in the military circles say will be assigned to the new posts later, and we know now that they were assigned. This was released on the February 12th. One of the main intrigues is what position Pavlo Palisha will take on the Brigadier General of the 93rd Brigade. The same evening, Syrsky revealed the names of some of the newly appointed deputies and stated that they have enormous knowledge and experience that will accelerate Ukraine's victory in the war. Already on February 11th, decree was published on the changes of commanders of the United Forces, Territorial Defenses, Airborne Assault Forces, and the new head of the Ground Forces. Ukrainian Pravda tells what is known about the new commanders and the latest changes in the army. Chief of the General Staff, Anatoly Bargilevich. 54 years old, born in a village of Omilyanivka in Zhytomyr region, he graduated from the Tashkent Higher Tank Command School as well as from the National Defense University of Ukraine in Kiev. Major General, prior to the appointment of the head of the General Staff, he was the commander of the Territorial Defense Forces. Before the full-scale war, the newly appointed chief of the General Staff, Anatoly Bargilevich, told journalists that in order to have successful military career, one must first dream and second act. He himself dreamed of a military career since childhood. Born in Zhytomyr region, graduated from the Tashkent Higher Tank Command School, he told reporters that he spent most of his military career as a cameraman. Operational management officers have all operational combat plans. This is a walking encyclopedia, a manual on how to use any unit, brigade, troop, grouping of heterogeneous forces, such as combined military units, aviation, naval forces, he said in an interview with Censor.net. This is another media source popular in Ukraine. Operators make plans. They implement, not cameraman, like an operator. It means like it's a personal, like a manager, sort of. So it's a mistranslation here. So operators make plans. They implement them. They are responsible for it. They are closed people who are never shown or advertised anywhere. The greatest rewards for the operator is when he is not mentioned. Such are the unwritten rules of the headquarters. He met the war in the East in 2014 as the head of the Operational Training Department of the main operational department of the General Staff. And in 2016, as the Deputy Commander of the Ground Forces, he took up the development of territorial defense, which was not yet a separate branch of the military. In 2021, Barhilevich believed that the territorial defense will not be given the status of a separate type of military. He explained this by the fact that this status implies certain functionality and tasks. However, the territorial defense forces became a separate branch of the military on January 1st, 2022, and due to full-scale aggression, increased their numbers from 10,000 to 120,000 large. In 2022, he continued to work under the command of Syrsky as the chief of staff of the Khortytsa operational strategic grouping of troops. Barhilevich headed the staff for almost a year and a half before being appointed in October 23 as the commander of the Territorial Defense Forces. Moreover, the previous commander, Ihor Tantsura, was removed from his post without explaining the reasons for this decision. As a historic look into why Tantsura was removed is because a lot of the territorial defense forces, the volunteers that came in to join the military at the start of the war, they were not trained and they were utilized without being fully trained, for example, sent straight to the front lines. At the start of the war, there was a lot of problems with the territorial defense forces, and that is why Tantsura was later removed. Even before Barhilevich returned to the Territorial Defense Forces, there were rumors that they wanted to include the Territorial Defense Forces in the Ground Forces grouping, thus eliminating the type of troops that played one of the key roles in the defense at the beginning of the full-scale invasion. With the appearance of a new commander, such conversation began to be heard even more often, and Barhilevich himself gave reasons for this, actually weakening this kind of troops. First of all, the most successful project of the Territorial Defense Forces, the training program for military personnel developed according to NATO standards, called Captain Trainings, was transferred to Shevchenko Military Institute of the KNU, I don't know what it stands for, after the arrival of Barhilevich. Secondly, the team that worked under the command of the Territorial Defense Forces and was looking for money for various projects has actually been disbanded. It was thanks to cooperation with foundations and volunteers that the territorial defenses to find the option to manage to find money for equipment, weapons, and trading. Finally, by the end of March, the process of transferring several ground defense brigades to other military branches should be completed. And this is in conditions where, after the flow of volunteers in 2022, the Territorial Defense Forces were not actually replenished with new people. Despite this, Barhilevich emphasized the need for further development of the Territorial Defense Forces. We must review the task of territorial defense which are entrusted to it, those prescribed in the law and related to the topic of national resistance. At this time, they do not accurately correspond to modernity and the great threats that already exist, he said in an interview to Army.info. In January, the Ukrainska Pravda approached Barhilevich with proposal to give an interview regarding plans for the development of ground defense, but the commander was not ready to meet with us. That was the first person. The second one, the commander of the ground forces, or Alexander Pavlyuk. 53 years old, born in Zvyagil, Zhytomyr region, hero of Ukraine. Hero of Ukraine is a highest award that can be given to military in Ukraine. Lieutenant General prior to appointment to the post of commander, Rustem Umerov was the first Deputy Minister of Defense. Alexander Syrsky, the current head of position of commander of the ground forces, knows better than anyone, since he held it before the promotion. According to the tasks, the role of land transport is one of the key ones in the military military structure. The head of the ground forces has approximately 600,000 servicemen under his command, which is the lion's share of people in the military. Therefore, interlocutors of Ukrainska Pravda also saw a person from Syrsky inner circle in this position. This is what 53-year-old Alexander Pavlyuk is called. During his introduction, Syrsky emphasized that when the president asked him who he saw as the head of the ground forces, I didn't even have any other candidates. Here's a picture of them both. Like the former commander-in-chief Valery Zaluzhny, Pavlyuk was born in Novgorod-Volhynsky, now Zvyagil. He began his military career in 1991 after graduating from the Kharkiv Guards Higher Tank Command School. From 1991 to 1993, he headed a tank platoon in Hillersleben. After that, he commanded a tank company in his native Novograd-Volhynsky, where he rose to the rank of deputy commander of the 30th Separate Mechanized Brigade. Pavlyuk spent 2006 and 2007 in Kosovo, where he commanded Ukrainian peacekeeper forces. At the time, the Ukrainian contingent had a fairly good reputation both among the Albanians and among the Serbs, who fought among themselves. Later, he returned to Novograd-Volhynsky, where he was the chief of staff of the 30th Brigade. From 2010 to 2015, Pavlyuk headed the 24th Separate Mechanized Brigade, now named after the King Danilo, extremely well known in Ukrainian circles, less known in Western media, which is stationed in Yavorov, Lviv region. Since March 2014, this brigade has participated in battles of Sloviansk, Krasny Liman, Kramatorsk, Lysychansk, and other cities on Donbass. Pavlyuk's fighters were also involved in the so-called Izvarin breakthrough, the withdrawal of Ukrainian units from a partial semi-encircled along the Ukrainian-Russian border. In 2017, after graduating from the Cherniakiv National University of Defense, Pavlyuk became the commander of the Ground Forces Operational Command West. In the summer of 2020, he was appointed the head of training of the Ground Forces Command. And in July 2021, he became the commander of the Combined Force Operation. The Combined Force Operation is how the operations of Ukrainian forces were named starting, I believe, 2015 to 2022 in the eastern part, fighting against Russians all this time. A month before the full-scale invasion, the Russian Federation in 2022, Pavlyuk gave an interview to the Times in which he directly spoke about the risks of an attack not only in Donbass. So he was one of the people that thought about this threat. The Russians are considering various options. Only Donetsk and Luhansk in the east will not suit them. They want to wound the whole country and through this wound to manipulate Ukraine as they wish, the general reflected. Pavlyuk then assumed that Russia could launch its attack on major cities, Kharkiv, Odessa, Dnipro, in order to cut off Ukraine from access to the sea and deprive it of its industrial and defense potential. As we learn now, he was absolutely correct. However, even with such threats, Pavlyuk predicted that the Ukrainians would be able to fight back. We have about 500,000 people who went through the war, in which they either lost someone or something, 500,000 who lost relatives, lost homes, or lost friends, and they are ready to tear Russians apart with their bare hands, Alexander Pavlyuk said at the time. While in the position of the commander of the Command Forces Operations, which is called in Ukrainian the OOS, he managed to defend the settlements in the east of Ukraine. In March 2022, at the height of the battle for Kiev, he was removed from the post of commander of the United Forces and appointed head of the Kiev military administration. He was responsible for organization of the defense and provision of the capital. This was a big thing back then, and everyone was saying, oh, why do they remove the commander from the forces of United Forces East? Well, it's because instead of having this operation in the East, now the command shifted to the full-scale war management to General Zaluzhny rather than having a separate commander for that area. So it was a question more of a kind of to be actualized with the time at the time. So it wasn't downgrade. Interlocutors of Ukrainska Pravda in the OVA characterized him from the positive side. According to the interview, Ukrainian officials, during his work in the Kiev region, he behaved cautiously when it came to civil matters. He always came to meetings where there were many civilians saying, "Gentlemen officers," says the interlocutor of the Ukrainska Pravda, who at the time worked with Pavlyuk in the regional administration. In May 2022, he was removed from the position of the head of the Kiev military administration, and in February 2023, he was appointed the first deputy minister of defense of Ukraine, where he worked until now. Next is the commander of the airborne assault troops, Igor Skibyuk. 48 years old, hero of Ukraine, brigadier general, prior to appointment, chief of staff and deputy commander of the defense forces, a graduate of the 80th Galician Assault Brigade. Igor Skibiuk is one of the least public members of the military in the list on the new commander-in-chief's team. His available biography begins in 1998 with his service on the 80th Galician Brigade of the Ukrainian Armed Forces. Presumably, it was as a part of that he took part in the peacekeeping missions in the anti-terrorist operation and the United Force operation in the east of Ukraine. The 80th went through almost all points of the Russian-Ukrainian war until February 2024. From the battle near Sloviansk in April 2014, which was the start of the war, to the battles of the Luhansk airport, the Donetsk airport, Avdiivka industrial zone, etc. So all of the major defense hotspots. In the fall of 2016, Skibiuk led the multinational command and staff exercise Maple Arch 2016 from the Ukrainian side. At the time, more than 200 Ukrainian, Polish, Lithuanian, and Canadian soldiers gathered at the Yarovi training grounds. Under the command of Skibiuk, the 80th tried to restrain the Russians in the Kherson region during a full-scale offensive. As the fighters of the brigade told the Ukrainska Pravda, on February 24th, they met at the Kolaniv training ground in the Mykolaiv region, and on the 25th they arrived in the Kherson region. However, the forces were disproportionate for an adequate repulse. Subsequently, the brigade took part in successful offensive on the Kharkiv region in the fall of 2022. It was thanks to Skibiuk's decisive and timely actions, according to official reports, that Izium was released. The Izium was the biggest center city in all of the Kharkiv operation. For the Kharkiv offense, the new commanders of the airborne troops, or the stormtroopers, he was awarded the Star of the Hero of Ukraine. Immediately after the Kharkiv region assault in the fall of 2022, Skibiuk joined the command of the they're called here as paratroopers, but it's an accurate translation. It's the strike forces, like shock troopers, so to say, who crossed paths with him at the front. Already the new role described by the medias as the balanced calm. He's described to the Ukrainska Pravda as balanced, calm, to some extent mild leader who never shouts at the personnel, able to delegate responsibilities. He goes to the front not only for awards but also for managing combat tasks. The appointment of Skibiuk to take place, the current head of the DSH, Maxim Murhoditsky, who has rather ambiguous reputations among the other soldiers, is called desirable by interlocutors of the Ukrainska Pravda among the soldiers. So, great military commander, well respected, hero of Ukraine, huge experience. The commander of the combined forces of the Ukrainian Armed Forces, Yuri Sodol. 53 years old, born in Chuguyev, Kharkiv region. He comes from a military family. His grandfather, father, and father-in-law are all artillerymen. Two sons of Yuri Sodol, as noted by Army Inform, he are also military. He graduated from the Sumy Higher Artillery Command School and the National University of Defense of Ukraine. Hero of Ukraine, Lieutenant General. Before being appointed to the position of Commander of the United Forces, he was the Commander of the Marine Corps. During his service, Yuri Sodol tried a considerable number of specialties and branches of the military. He began his service as an artilleryman, continued as a paratrooper, and eventually became a Marine. He gave 12 years of his life to the 25th Airborne Brigade. In 2003, he headed to the brigade's artillery, and in 2007, the brigade itself. Together with the 25th, Sodol spent the first 2 years of the anti-terrorist operation serving in the 17 cities of the East, Army Inform notes. We're in a fighting mood. This is our land, and we don't need to tell anyone how to live here. We will return and finish what we have started, Sodol said in October 2014 in Dnipropetrovsk, talking about the brigade's rotation. In 2015, Sodol moved from the 25th to command of the strike forces, becoming the deputy commander. And already in March 2018, when the naval forces of Ukraine were brought to the NATO standards and created a separate command of the Marine Corps in their structure, he became their commander. In order to receive the Blue Beret of Marine, Sotol at the age of 47 overcame a several kilometers obstacle course on the Olechivsky Sand. Journalists describe Sotol as a commander who strived to be on the front lines as often as possible. He said, "You need to see the eyes, hear the intonations of each of the commander." The Marines themselves became the elite branch of the military in Ukraine a few years before the full-scale invasion. Traditionally, Marines went on rotation in the direction of Mariupol. Some of them, in particular, the 36th Brigade, the 1st, 501st, and the 36th Brigade battalions met there on February 24th. Subsequently, the 36th Brigade of Marines heroically defended Mariupol at the Ilyich Metal Complex. The 35th forced Inhulets and advanced near Velika Novosilka. Currently, the 35th, 36th, as well as the newly formed Marine Brigades, the 37 and 38, hold a breachhead on the left bank of Dnipro of the Kherson region near the village of Krinky. However, some of its participants with whom Ukrainska Pravda communicated, and those words can we trust, called the operations in Kherson region almost the burial of the Marine Corps. For these operations, Marines were also used as stormtroopers and infantrymen, which is not typical for this type of troops. This is what we've heard for many, many different troops, that they are getting mixed up, and it's, well, I mean, when you have this huge requirement for the troops, it's not unusual. This is not ideal circumstance Ukraine finds them in. But again, very down to the ground commander, knows what's happening, knows how things are on actual front lines. Ihor Plahuta is the commander of the Territorial Defense Forces. Age, place of birth, education, and occupation before the appointment to the position of the commander of the Territorial Defense Forces are not known. He served the internal troops, now the National Guard, Major General. Ihor Plahuta can safely be called the most mysterious and ambiguous appointment of the new team. His public biography begins only in 2005, where Plahuta became the commander of the separate presidential brigade. There are no mentions of the brigade's service in the press at the time. In a couple of years, in 2009, he headed the 169th Educational Center Desna. In 2013-2014, during the Revolution of Dignity, he was the head of the Southern Territorial Command of the internal troops of the Ministry of Internal Affairs. There are at least 2 references to this presence in the Maidan in open sources. On December 10th in 2013, Plahuta commanded to the journalist about the cleaning of Bankova and Lieutenantska Street from the protesters' barricades. He explained that approximately 400 soldiers of the internal troops and Berkut were needed for this. And also, as Ukrainska Pravda wrote at the time, he called the people in black clothes who dismantled the barricades community workers. The clearing of the barricades was preceded by the expulsion of protesters from the presidential administration to Kreshchatyk. The demonstrators could not resist because they were surrounded by security forces on all sides. Second, on February 2018, as Hromadske reported with reference to the video reconstruction of the events of the day, Plahuta assured journalists that law enforcement officers would not storm the protesters' barricades. However, it was on that evening that the security forces went on a big assault on Maidan of Independence. On the other hand, some participants of those events indicate that Plahuta was one of the few commanders who went to negotiate with the protesters and tried to get his subordinates out. Also, serviceman Maxim Gromov noted on Facebook that he crossed paths during the war with Plahuta and has only positive experience. He said that Plahuta was strict but a man of business. After the Maidan, Plahuta became the deputy head of the Udo Institute in Ukraine. Plahuta appointment to the post of the Territorial Defense Commander was called the return of the scoop by one of his former subordinates and current frontline officer in a conversation with the Ukrainska Pravda. The prospects for change are not very rosy in the Territorial Defense Forces themselves. In particular, several interlocutors of the Ukrainska Pravda expressed their fear that the new commander will continue the process of cleaning the Territorial Defense Forces, transferring the brigades into subordination to other commands. So this is the story about the territorial defense. An important thing I followed up about Plahuta, about this story, was he actually in charge of a police that cleared out the defendants? And the important part is, as you mentioned here, that he was cleared basically on any kind of charges, so he was not responsible. And secondly, many soldiers, once this article and this news kind of story about him being like the responsible for fighting the revolution in 2014, a lot of military came out, recorded videos, and said, stop shitting on our commander. He's the best. He's like the super commander that we're having. Like, he stands behind us at every corner. We could not have asked for a better commander. This was the militaries that recorded these videos themselves. And it's very, very important to note to this story that no, there is, by this point, I would say, no ambiguity about his credentials. It was just article from when they were just appointed. Vadim Sukharevsky is the deputy chief of unmanned aerial vehicles. 39 years old, born in Berehove in Transcarpathia, he graduated from the Mukachevo Lyceum with enhanced military physical training, the Zagadishny National Academy of Ground Forces. Man, these Ukrainian names are just crazy. And the National University of Defense of Ukraine, Kiev. He was wounded near Krasny Liman in the Krasny in the Luhansk region in the summer of 2014. A hero of Ukraine, colonel, married, has 2 small children. Prior to his appointment to the post deputy head commissar, he was the commander of the 59th Separate Motorized Infantry Brigade, named after Yakov Hanzinyuk. I've heard about them a little bit, but not that much. Vadim Sukharevsky, nickname Borsuk. Borsuk, I believe, is a badger. Is a legend of the 10-year Russian-Ukrainian war. It was he who on April 13, 2014, as a private in the 80th Brigade, a private, gave the first order to open fire in this war. Yes, so they appointed the person that literally was the first to resist the Russian aggression, that fired the first shot in self-defense, essentially. At the time, the 80th of the several armored personnel carriers covered the Ukrainian special forces in a battle with Girkin's fighters near Slovyansk. The sound of machine gun fire, as the witness of the story told the Ukrainska Pravda, forced the militants to retreat. So Girkin's team had to retreat because this guy decided not to surrender his country to them. On that day, thanks to Sukharevsky, the saying, "You see the enemy, eat," was born in the Ukrainian army. In 2023, the Ukrainian group Cossack System released a song with the same name dedicated to the 503rd Battalion and the 59th Brigade. The next and largely defining page in Sukharevsky's life was the Marines. In 2016, he headed the 503rd Battalion, and in 2021, he became the chef of the staff of the 35th Brigade of Marines. Forbes journalists describe Borsuk as a demanding and attentive commander. He fired avatars. So it's it's calling the soldiers who abuse alcohol. It's like people that don't care for the war, like war tourists, sort of a attitude. Like we're just here to kind of get fun, drunk, fire at the enemy, whatever, and don't need to subordinate, don't need to, and so on. Personally conducted interviews for the brigade, managed the training school for the new recruits. The basis of military activity is the vertical, the concept and the sanctity of the order. Of course, when any serviceman receives an order, it is a dogma that must be followed. Sukharevsky shared his views in an interview with Suspilne. At the beginning of the full-scale invasion in March 2022, Sukharevsky became the commander of the 59th Brigade, which fought its way out of the encircled Aleshki. The first thing I did was to force everyone to dig in properly and set up a high-quality defense, he told Forbes. Until the liberation of Kherson in the fall of 2022, the 59th fought in the south, and on the day of the president's arrival in November 2022, its fighters, together with Sukharevsky, were invited to raise the flag over the newly liberated city. After that, the 59th was transferred without recovery to the Avdiivka region, where an extremely difficult defensive operation is currently underway. A few days before Sukharevsky's new appointment, part of the legendary Da Vinci Battalion, led by Syrsky Filimonov, joined his battle. Why will Sukharevsky take care of the direction of the unmanned aerial vehicles? Sukharevsky believes that unmanned aerial vehicles play a colossal role in the current war. It is known from Borsuk's interview that by his orders, the 59th Brigade organized its own production and repair of the FPV drones, as well as ammunition for FPV, Mavic, and aircraft-type drones. The brigade independently produced ground drones that can mine at the distance of 4 to 8 kilometers. As part of the 59th Brigade, one of the most famous unmanned unmanned aerial vehicles companies, Birds of Magyar, operated for some time. On February 6th, Volodymyr Zelensky instructed the Cabinet of Ministers together with the General Staff to work out the issue of creating an unmanned systems as a separate type of force in the structure of the armed forces of Ukraine. So it is likely that Sukharevsky will be responsible for this direction. Mikhailo Drapate, Deputy Chief of the General Staff for Military Training. One of the battalion commanders who worked side by side with him in the Kherson direction mentions this Odessa proverb when talking about Mikhailo Drapatoi. You can fasten a helmet. It means that it will not be possible to deceive a person because he knows his business well. The combatants told Ukrainska Pravda how Brigadier General Drapati sometimes checked the weapons of the personnel, delving into the details of the level of a division or platoon commander. He would approach the soldier and say, "Weapons for accounting," and if necessary, disassemble the machine gun yourself or get behind the wheel of the BMP. It was, talking about the BMP, by the way, it was the BMP in which Drapati was sitting that the whole country saw on May 2014. Then, at the beginning of the Russian-Ukrainian War, Drapati commanded the 2nd Mechanized Battalion of the 72nd Separate Mechanized Brigade. The battalion ended in Mariupol to free the hostages in the city police department. When the soldiers were returning from the operation, they saw that the road was blocked by a barricade, and Drapato's BMP picked up speed and broke through it. This is one of the most legendary videos of the war. It's the video that pretty much defined Ukrainian resistance. Like, it was so prominent at the time that it was like, yes, let's do it. So this is from the Mariupol. So there is a barricade with the militants, the pro-Russian militants tried to construct, and then there is a Ukrainian BMP just crashes through it on a high speed, absolutely tearing through and trying to get to the where actual forces of the Russians have taken over the control of the city and to fight back with them. That is absolutely incredible that this person is still alive and kicking and now in charge of the training for the Ukrainian armed forces. In the summer of 2014, Drapati led the breakthrough of the Ukrainian forces from the encirclement near Chervonopartizansky in the Luhansk region. Leaving the Izvarinsky cauldron, 260 soldiers were saved, and with them more than 30 pieces of equipment. In 2016, Drapati became the commander of the 58th Separate Motorized Infantry Brigade, which at the time was performing tasks in the Donetsk region. And in 2017, he was the commander of the 58th Separate Motorized Infantry Brigade, named after the Hetman Ivan Vukovsky. Drapati is a full Knight of the Orders of the Bogdan Khmelnytsky. He received the first in August 2016 and third in July of 2022. Until January 2024, Drapati headed the Kherson Operational Group, and now he has become the Deputy Chief of the General Staff and will be responsible for the preparation and quality training of the military. Former subordinates called Drapati an experienced officer who, while performing tasks, always tried to preserve personnel and does everything to reduce losses among his comrades. One of the combatants in a conversation with the Ukrainska Pravda recalls that case when Drapati tried to restrain the commanders so that they did not communicate with that soldiers too harshly. And then it talks about some dark horses of this appointment, which little to know was known about. And the biggest dark horse on the list is the new appointments is Alexander Syrsky, Deputy Colonel Andriy Lebedenko. The director of his new work is innovation and the technological component in the army and the combat systems. There is no publicly available information about Lebedenko's military experience. However, in September 2022, he became a Knight of the Order of Danilo Halitsky for personal courage and selfless action shown in the defense of the state sovereignty and territorial integrity of Ukraine. More is known about the deputy chiefs of the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, Brigadier Generals Volodymyr Khrabatyuk and Oleksiy Shevchenko. Khrabatyuk is from Vinnytsia region. In 2014, as a major, he headed the Ukrainian unit carrying out tasks in maintaining peace and security in Kosovo. In 2015, he assumed command of the 54th Separate Mechanized Brigade, which would later receive an honorary name in honor of Ivan Mazepa. At the same year, Khrabatyuk was awarded the Order of Bogdan Khmelnytsky Third Degree for personal courage and heroism. Subsequently, he became the first deputy commander of the Operational Command West. A year ago, his candidacy was named among those who would lead the Zaporozhye military administration. Khrabatyuk's direction in general staff will be operational work of staff, management and planning. Let us know about Brigadier General Oleksiy Shevchenko. Served in the artillery in command positions, he was the first deputy head of the Sahaydachny Academy of Land Forces in Lviv. In April 2022, he headed the military academy in Odessa and was represented by then head of the ground forces, Alexander Syrsky. In August of the same year, Shevchenko received the rank of Brigadier General. In 2020, while still a colonel, Shevchenko received the Order of Danilo Khalitsky and the April 22, the Order of Bogdan Khmelnytsky Third Degree. Oleksiy Shevchenko will be responsible for logistics and the general staff. So in this article, we saw how the new command is pretty much built up from on-the-ground professionals. And I think the biggest change that we see here is that there is very little effort put into trying to get public figures with a lot of public appeal into these positions. It seems that a lot of these nominees are very professional militaries. So we can kind of say that the whole reshuffling of the staff is when Zelensky's looking at the situation and Syrsky is looking at the situation, they are just saying, okay, if public support is wavering, if the situation is not winnable right now for us and we cannot just drive on pure upbeat adrenaline, then the next best thing is better discipline. And I believe that this is kind of what describes the new team that came into these positions, and I'm expecting these positions to be managed really well. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope it was useful for you to give a perspective on who is going to be heading the new armed forces of Ukraine. A very dark anniversary is coming up in a couple of days, which is the second anniversary of the war, of full-scale invasion, and 10th anniversary of the war of Russia against Ukraine, which is absolutely terrible that we have to still go on with this. There are a couple of links in the description about some of the events that are being organized and called upon for people all across the world to go out to show their support for Ukraine. Please check out the links in the description and the first comment to find if there is anything around your area, around your city, so that you can maybe participate and make sure that everyone sees that support for Ukraine still stands strong. I love you all. Slava Ukraini. I'll see you guys next time.